Okay, welcome everybody. Today we are going to go over the employee self-service timesheet overview. It's been a little bit since we've done this and there's been a lot of changes. So please ask if you have any questions. If we don't have the answers, we'll get them for you. This PowerPoint shows the agenda, but let me show you where you can find it because I posted it yesterday. So were you registered here? If you go down to the August trainings, I dropped it right here. So we are not going to go by slide. I'm going to be more in the application, but I am going to go in the order of the slides. So if you're taking notes or anything, that's going to be right in order. So we'll start off with this agenda page. I have the links here, and it is the link to the ESS timesheet guideline. So that's kind of the basic format that we're going to be using. So I'm in the documentation for ESS already. So in the appendix, there's that timesheet guideline, and we'll go through configuring timesheets, the workflows and the groups and the group chains, and then the different timesheet menu options for each role and what they see, as well as the timesheet entry approval and export to USPS. So again, this is going to be, we'll go in order of this as well, which follows the PowerPoint, which follows our demo. So this is what we're going to be covering. There's a link here that is also in the appendix. Let me go back to the appendix. Couple options above, ESS menu options by ESS role. Now that's all of employee self-service roles, but there are the 3 timesheet related roles that we'll be reviewing as well. So all of this is in the documentation and the links are provided. We'll go through the timesheet manager menu, which includes other setup like setting up periods, the automatic period generator, the shifts, the holidays, escalated approval, regular approval, and export. So again, just ask questions as we go along. So the first step to getting ESS timesheet to be enabled is to go under the system configuration menu, and the district manager or the admin role can do this. All right, for some reason my note page is not working. There we go. So under the system configuration menu in ESS, the district manager or admin role can turn this function on. And I have a screenshot here, but I'll show you in the application where you just click it and then save it. And then once that's enabled, the timesheet configuration menu option appears. The timesheet period close configuration menu option appears and the workflow configuration option. And we'll go through those. And what these does is the timesheet configuration will allow the district to configure like what's on the timesheets in the increments, and also whether or not they want to require an overtime reason or send out email notifications. And with that, well, I'm jumping ahead. The period close enables the automatic closing if the district wants. And then the timesheet workflow configuration is the setup of like what's on the emails, like in the subject line or in the body of the email. So let's go in to the application. And most of the day, I am going to be logged in as the admin user. I will point out when I'm not and when we go into another user. That way I can show you all the options. So under the system menu down here, if you go to the configuration, this has already been check marked. So I would edit, check mark, and then save. But this has been done. So then these three options appear on the configuration menu. Also on, I don't know if I have to be in the user. No. This also appears on the profile of the user. So I just went under this user's profile. And if I don't want timesheet emails, I can opt out by just check marking it and saving it. Okay. The notifications, all ESS users will have this little notification bell up here, up in the upper right corner. This will display those number of unread notifications and it gets, I don't have any in this user, but it will get updated every minute. And that's where they would get those notifications as well as the emails. Okay, so what will show for the timesheet piece of the notification would be like when the user submits the timesheet to the supervisor gets a notification. Or when the timesheet has been approved or rejected, the user that submitted the timesheet will get the notification. Okay, so let's go back to that timesheet configuration, which is the first menu option that appeared when we enabled this timesheet configuration. And this is where the districts can choose their time entry precision. They can choose an hour, half an hour, a quarter an hour. I am lost in my notes, so just a moment. And letting somebody in. Okay. So this is the time entry precision is used to increase or decrease the hours worked and the break time fields on the timesheet. So districts can configure that, whether configure this. We're just going to leave it at no restrictions. And then if they want to require a reason for overtime items, they can check mark that. And then whether or not to email. And there's little tooltips that pop up too. So when this is enabled, the user will receive an email notifying that if another user, like a district timesheet manager, would edit their timesheet, the user would get an email. So I'm going to leave those options as is. And then the next configuration option that was enabled is the timesheet period close configuration. And this just sets whether or not the district wants to close their periods automatically. So the system does it. And you specify the number of days that you want after the end date to close. And finally, the timesheet workflow configuration. And this is where the district can customize the wording used in the default email notifications. So when the timesheet gets submitted, if you click on here, and there's little tooltips. This would be the subject of the email that can be customized. And this would be the email body when the timesheet is submitted. This would be where the district could customize the approval email details, whether it's the subject or the body of the email. Same with approval, rejection, and then we'll talk later about escalated approval. So instead of having that, I will give you an example. I'm going to put a timesheet has been approved via escalated or via the district manager with the following details, and then that will populate on their email. If the escalated approver included a note, the note would be included in the body of the email as well as the timesheet. So then once I save this, that's going to be what goes out on the escalated emails. So there's flexibility there. Slide 7 of the PowerPoint did have an example of an actual rejection email. I guess I could go to that. It's tiny, but this is where I showed you how if you click on this, it opens this, and then here's the example of the blurb in the email. And the note, I am rejecting this old timesheet. Okay, so before we go on to the rest of the setup, that's the configuration options, but there's groups and group chains. But before we go on to that, I'm going to review a little bit about the roles that are used for timesheets. So a user role allows the employees to use ESS, and this is the basic role granted by default. You can have more roles than just the user role, but I am going to log into a user and only a user. So you see the roles here on the profile is only a user, but you can add more users. Well, she can't because she's only a user and doesn't have the roles, but the right role privilege will be able to do that. So the point here is what I wanted to do is show you what the options are for just a plain user, and you only have this My Timesheet menu option. That's the only place that the normal user can go. They can view, they can edit, and we'll go through this in more detail. So basically, a user needs to be set up in ESS, and the user, they can use the timesheet application, but for this employee, Paige Riviera, in order for her to enter timesheets, she's going to have to be set up on the USPS side. So let me go into that. This is giving you us background of what we're going to be talking about in more in depth. So let me log in. And I am actually, I had a different person in my notes that I was going to show. So I'm just going to show you the position. That the position that's in USPS, what is required for this employee to be able to enter hours is this timesheet required must be checked, and the supervisor on the position record must have a supervisor. Now there's a compensation menu option, but I'm just going to go down here. Any non-contract compensation records also must have a compensation start date and a compensation stop date. That helps identify which compensation should be related to which timesheet when they're extracted. So that's an example of a timesheet user. In brief, we'll go through how they enter it later. The other role is a timesheet approver. such as like a supervisor. My usernames are like the role in this demo application. So this is the supervisor's, actually it's the timesheet approver role view. So they also have the timesheet menu. And when you click on that, they have what the user had, but they also have the supervisor timesheet menu. That allows the supervisor or the timesheet approver role to view all their staff timesheets, but not approve or reject right here. And then since they are an approver, they also have this menu where they can approve timesheets. And lastly, there is a timesheet workflow timesheet approval workflow manager. And that is where this person with the role sets up the groups and the group chains. So I'm going to log into that. Or log into the user with the approval workflow. So again, they have the timesheet supervisor, they have the timesheet approval, but what is added to this approval workflow manager is the ability to set up groups and group chains. And that's where we're going next in the setup. The other person that has this option besides admin is the timesheet manager. Let's get rid of this. And that's where I'm going to land, and we'll set up some groups and talk about that. It's going to have the same menu options. But even more, because this timesheet manager also has more setup options that we're going to talk about as well. And that is why I logged into this user, who's not only a user and an approver, but also a timesheet manager. So with the timesheet manager, again, they have the same menu options, but now they have these extra ones. They don't have the user menu option with the groups or group chains. So the group manager can view all district timesheets, no matter, this will go away eventually. There we go. Can view all district timesheets, no matter the approval status, which is indicated over here. They can view if there's they are a timesheet approver, but I guess this particular one does not have any timesheets out there waiting to be approved for the supervisor. But if there were, they would be listed here or on the home page. They have this export because they can export approved timesheets for the posting to USPS. And they also have the ability to generate this exported timesheet history overview report. So we're going to go to the setups, which is the automatic period generator, the period, and the shift, and the timesheet holidays. Then we'll come back to those other few menu options that the timesheet manager has. And actually, I'm sorry, before we do that, we'll set up groups because I'm going to follow along that checklist that I told you about. So I'm just going to log into admin and we'll talk about groups, and then we'll go back to that setup for periods and Okay, remember this user as an admin has all menu options. So the workflow setup. When creating timesheets, you can find them under the user menu. You see groups and group chains. When you click on groups, you'll see two tabs, the leave request groups and the timesheet groups. So I clicked on the timesheet and you can see different ones set up here. This is also managed by the timesheet manager, which we were just logged into, the district manager in this role as an admin user. So once these are set up, they're added to the group chain, which makes the approval process. So starting with these icons, there's the standard icons. This one's view. So let's view the cafeteria timesheet. And this allows, let me back up. When you click on this view, it gives you these options down below. You can edit when you're viewing this by just clicking on that and adding group members or whatever you need to do to edit. You also have the ability to generate an audit report from a start date to an end date. And that would give you the activity on this group. And you can copy this group to the other tab for the leave request group. As I was preparing this, I was logged into a user that only had the timesheet workflow manager role and not the leave request workflow manager role. And they were still able to copy it to the leave request. They just don't see it. So they can do that. And then this also gives you the ability to go to the same thing and edit it. So remember, you can click this button to copy to the leave request groups, or it's a grid option here. And there's the little pop-up. And you can delete. However, if the group is included in one of these group chains, then it cannot be deleted. So let's create one. We're going to call it the building and grounds workflow. You can enter a description if you want. Sometimes, like when I get back to the grid, I'll show you. Sometimes I will put the user. I have put the function, which we'll talk about over here. So it's customizable. So the function is and or. The and means that all members of this group must approve. The or only means one member needs to approve. So let's choose just the or. And then this is where you select your members. And who was I going to select? I guess it doesn't really matter. Once I got, and I think you can start typing too. Yeah. And as you start typing, the system will populate the name. So, but once you have that, you click on add and it'll drop down below. And then you click create. So this group is saying that when I use it into the next thing that we're going to talk about, the group chain, that this supervisor, Nicole Joyce, is going to be included. So I forgot. Let me go back to that because there are a couple additional roles that can be added other than employee name. And these are the supervisor, which comes from the USPS position screen, and that's why that has to be populated. So the position supervisor can be chosen for the group. Let's remove this. And to remove users, you would click on this and then remove from grid. So now this group only has the supervisor. So if this is turnover goes, turnover of employees, you don't have to change necessarily the name here. You change the name under the employee's position record and it will pull the supervisor from the position record. The other special role or additional role would be the manager. Right here, the manager, timesheet manager. And that uses the role that is assigned to the user in this application that's assigned the timesheet manager role. So those are available as well. Keep in mind though that let's say the position supervisor, Bill Gates, is in the USPS position screen. The position supervisor in ESS, Bill Gates, must have that supervisor approval role in order to approve timesheets. So anything that's in the group, they got to have the applicable roles for it to all work. I keep going out of here and I have more to talk about. So you choose this isn't normally the name, but the group member type, you have options here too. The approver can approve and receive the email notifications. You can set up a group member with read-only access where they can view the timesheets but cannot approve timesheets. Or you can do checkmark users with read-only access with notifications. So maybe somebody in human resources that want to be notified that the timesheets are out there or payroll, and they would get notifications, but they can't edit or they only have read-only access. So any group member has those options. So once that's saved, we're ready to set up a group chain with groups. And again, there's a tab for leave request groups and a tab for timesheet groups. And in this demo, it's pretty basic, my groups and my group chains, but they can be very customizable. So when viewing a bus driver timesheet approval group chain, I clicked on view on the grid, and these options are available. You can click on, we'll set one up in a minute, but this option, matched employees, will give you the matched employees that match the criteria of the setup of the group chain. And as long as employees, I'm jumping ahead there, you can copy this group chain to the leave request group chain by clicking this button. And you can generate an audit report and as edit and change your options, which we'll talk about in a moment. That's from the view icon. The edit icon does the same thing. You can edit, which we'll talk about. This is the matched employee icon. And we'll talk about the priorities in a moment, but from the menu, you can make the priority of the group approval higher or lower. You can copy to the leave request group chains by clicking this button, and you can delete. If you attempt to delete a group chain that contains outstanding timesheets, the system will try to determine if there's another group chain that might be applicable. If there is another chain that's applicable, it'll restart using that new group chain. If there are no applicable group chains that those timesheets can fall into, an error message will be displayed that the group chain cannot be deleted. All right, so instead of you would create one here, but let's view one like we're creating one. So let's go back to that bus driver timesheet group chain. So here you enter your label. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it transportation timesheets, bus driver timesheets. You can enter any customizable description. Here, I was just making a note that this chain just has a supervisor approved, so that on my grid, I just kind of know that like this group, the supervisor and this person is the approvers. That's just my trick, but again, this is completely customizable for the district. They can use whatever description they want. And then the priority. The priority is specified to determine the workflow order for each group chain. So it determines the order in which the approval workflows are evaluated. So again, before, when we were talking about deleting a workflow group, if there was a timesheet that was included in that chain that you want to delete, but there's a timesheet, if it falls into another one, like with another priority, it would transfer to that group. But it determines the order. So on this grid, you can see the priority. Sometimes they're different priorities that that they have set. They can be the same, and in this demo, they are the same. If two chains or I have three here that are the same priority of one, it's the names of the groups that determine the order, and they go alphabetical. So I could have like 1, 2, 3 here, and it would be the same as this alphabetical order. Is there any questions on that? I don't know if I explained that well. But it sets the order in which the approval group chains are evaluated. So then you have available groups, and you see the building and grounds timesheet group that we set up. So you have available and you have selected. Here, this group was selected for this group chain. You also have other specific timesheet options that you can or cannot, it's optional to filter to. Under this one, you have the ability to filter by appointment type. So certified or classified, hourly or daily. And if either of these are left blank, all appointment types will be included. If this was left blank, all appointment types would be included. So under specific employees and positions, you can select employees. I start typing their name, and it'll automatically filter. And then once you add that, choose it, you click it, it falls below on the grid. It defaults to all positions. You can double click this to see all all he or she positions. You could leave this empty to select all, or again, select a specific position. So you can select them individually or choose all. If multiple jobs are included in this workflow for the position supervisor to approve, say she's a secretary and aide and a secretary, this might be another job in a different building, for instance. I can select those and then they would be displayed in order as you selected and separately on the grid in the order of the selection. To remove the employee, so you decided, oops, this Mariah employer user should not belong in this group chain, you would click it and remove it from the grid, the same kind of way that you chose it and then added it to the grid. And then you have even more options to customize if you want. However, I forget this trick. If you're sorting by employees and positions, you don't have the ability to specify the pay groups, departments, and buildings. It's like one or the other. So if I would remove, no, I don't want to remove this because this might be used in an example in my demo. So I'm not going to change this group, but, and I don't know if I have one that it's one or the other. So you can specify by employees and positions or by pay groups, departments, or buildings. Any questions? Okay, so we got our groups and group chains set up. And this is when I was going to go back and pick up the rest of the setup that the timesheet manager needs to do, like the periods and the automatic period generator. So I'm just going to stay in as admin. But again, the timesheet manager has this role. And, excuse me, the timesheet periods are where administrators can monitor and manage the configured timesheet periods. When you create a new period, it's open by default. And the period remains open until it's either manually closed or set up to automatically close based on the configuration. And we'll go through those options. Multiple timesheet periods can exist. You notice that they don't overlap here. And the closed date time, this column, only is populated when it's auto-generated or automatically closed. I'm sorry. The closed date time only is displayed when a period is automatically closed and not manually closed. So this period grid provides several functions. Again, you can view. When you view, you have the ability to run a audit report between beginning and end dates, close date time, and you would generate that. Well, there. You have the ability to edit the beginning and ending date. And you have the ability to close the period. But you also have that option on the grid. So this one would close the period. This one icon would open the period. And if you were to delete, you would get this confirmation to stop the user and confirm that that's the action that you really want to do. If you manually, I believe this is still true, if you manually close a period, let me say this, manually closing an auto-generated timesheet period does not automatically create the next period. It's the automatic closure that would do that. The grid will show whether it's closed or not, and again, it's filterable. Those are all closed periods. There's 2 open. On all these grids, as you know, well, this one doesn't have many more options, but this more button is what I call it over here. There's usually options that you pull into the grid that you can put and display on your grid. So those are periods. And I talked about if it was auto-generated or not, indicated by these green check marks. And that is the next setup over here that the timesheet manager has that you have the option of setting up. Once this is set up, the automatic period generator can automatically create the timesheet periods. And there could be multiple period generators set up and configured as long as the periods don't overlap existing timesheet periods. So let's go into one. The one that's running and enabled. Once it's enabled, the periods will be created and then they will show on that periods grid that we were just in and indicated by that. But how to get this set up? Let's go into the one that is set up. And I wanted to show you one more thing to show you that before I show you the setup. Currently, no, sorry. Under district timesheets, currently you can see that this is the only period that is existing right now for 4 employees, 8/16 to 8/29. So keep that in mind. And we're going to look at and pretend we set up this automatic period generator. I want it set to true because as soon as I save it, it's going to enable this job. But my setup here is that it's closing at 12 a.m. I choose my start date and I select the date when the automatic periods should begin to generate. And it should coincide with the start date of the payroll period. And again, I don't know. Moving on. So I'm going to start in on August 16th and I'm going to ask it to create 2 future timesheet periods. So when this is saved, that'll do that. The timesheet reminders, this will send, I set it up for 2 days, and it will send an email reminder to the timesheet employees, notifying them of an upcoming period end date that your timesheet is due. So you have options to choose up to 36 hours and up to 7 days. Here, this is just set up to remind you for 2 days before the close of the period. The next, the duration. This is this must match USPS's payroll cycle. I lost my, there we go. So it must match the payroll cycle in USPS. So as you choose these options, the options will change too. For example, we'll just talk about the biweekly one first, since it's set up like that. this will require you, indicated by these little asterisks by the label, this will require you to choose the close, whether you want to close on a non-business day. Here it's chosen close normally. You can close on the previous business day, or if you can close on the next business day. So if it happens to be a Saturday, this option would just close normally on a Saturday. You have the option to skip months. Say this is for timesheets for 9-month employees. You can skip the summer months. And with biweekly, you specify the period ending date, which in this case is Saturday, and the period closing date. And this was configured. You can do, remember that was the timesheet period close configuration. We set it for 3 days after the period end date. You can use that, or you can choose another option here. The positions, I have the positions specified that these 4 should get timesheets. And you would just start typing it and it would populate for you to select. To update the position, like to choose another position, you would just double click on this position line. So double click and it opens it up. So once you have all that set up, you would click save. Again, there was other options here. So let's go to the weekly. And you can see this is still the same. The skip months, the period end date, you specify, and the period closing date. Semi-monthly, this populates and asks you and requires you, because of that little asterisk, to enter a second period ending date. And then monthly, it removes that. So with the duration of your USPS payroll pay period should match the ones set in here, and the options will change based on that. So since I have this set to true, to yes, true, run it, as soon as I click this, it'll tell you that the automatic period generator runs this job, generate periods job. And because I specified employees in the automatic period generator, it will also create the timesheets because I specified it down there. If I was supposed to have a timesheet, I would not get one when this happens because I was not listed in the automatic period generator selection. So you can close this, or here you can click here to take you to that batch job, which again is another menu option. I don't know if I mentioned that I guess I have to, that the timesheet manager has. It's under the system menu, but that's another menu option that the higher timesheet manager has, and it can see these jobs running. So the one that we just ran was the generate periods job that completed. We'll ignore those failed ones right now, because that's with leave balances, and we're not doing leave balances. Okay, so that shows completed. Remember, I showed you those district timesheets that they were only 4, but because I had selected employees under the automatic period generator, if I go to the district timesheet, you can see it generated all those timesheets that, again, just for a review, had their USPS positions selected for timesheet required, a supervisor populated, any compensation dates populated, and included in the automatic generator. And it created the timesheets for these employees. I kind of like that feature. Any questions? Let's take a look at a timesheet. So the next thing we're going to talk about are shifts. And timesheets are recommended, or timesheet shifts are recommended because it allows these times to be automatically populated into the timesheet. So to set up shifts, we have a few of them. Let's look at the driver. And when you create one, you would name the shift. Obviously, it's called the driver timesheet shift here. The shift is from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can enter a break time. You can put 1 for an hour break, half for a half an hour break, or leave nothing. It's not required. If the break times are not included, the entire time that the employee enters for the line item will be used. So like 8 to 12, even though the employee will have the ability to manually enter a break time on their timesheet. But you can specify it here or not. But you do have to specify, indicated by that tiny asterisk, that you have to enter the hours per day, hours on a work day, sorry. Currently, the times, the start and end times, the break time, and the hours on a work day don't balance against each other. They just have to be entered correctly. A flexible shift is if this flag is enabled on the timesheet, the times, the start time and the end time will be blank, forcing the employee/user to enter 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on every day by editing each line of the timesheet. To get around that, you would end up not selecting this, and these times would populate on the timesheet. However, I can think of one example where you would use this. It would be for a substitute bus driver. When you do select that, you notice these times that we set are disabled because, again, times are going to have to be populated by the user on the timesheet. If there are no shift set up for the position or the employee, ESS will automatically set it up as a flexible shift, meaning if there's no shift for that person, they're going to have to enter their hours. So again, we recommend setting up a shift because then the times populate and it's more of a verification on your timesheet for the user.
Can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
So the only way to assign shifts is per person, per position. It just seems like that's when I've trained this, I think that's honestly the biggest pushback I've gotten is we want to have shifts for everybody, right? But then you have to go through here person by person by person underneath that select positions for this shift. Like, why can't we do that by pay group the same way you would do the approvals? Which, like, their thought was, let's literally just, like, right, like, let's literally just take the approval flow. And for the most part, those people that are getting approved by that person have mostly similar shifts. I mean, there's definitely differences. So each approval group might have, 2 shifts, like an AM custodian and a PM custodian, right? Like that's a real example, but I feel like it's kind of, and then you do have to kind of remember every time you add a new employee, you got to come out here. Whereas like the group chains work really well because you can do it by pay group or department code or building code or something that's more automatic, right? Like
That's
this
a good
this
idea.
involves a lot of remembering.
I like that idea. I will check to see if there's a feedback request for that. If not, or better yet, why don't you just put in a ticket and we'll look that up and we'll look
Yeah,
for that
I will
because
do
it
that.
would be
Yeah.
right. It could be on this screen or like you said, maybe under the group chain.
Yeah, if it just had the similar, like you know how the group chain you can either do specific employees, positions, or that stuff. Like I don't know how other people feel, but if it worked the exact same way, I would be thrilled with that.
Yeah, I will make sure
And
that request. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
um, Andrew, Lori had put in something in the chat saying that we have an existing feedback issue for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, Another option you have on setting up timesheet shifts is a split shift, and that opens up another shift within the shift because sometimes bus drivers are 8 to 10 and then 2 to 4 in the afternoon. So this accommodates them um, with the split break time, the split start times, and then their timesheet would work the same way. And again, the icons are the same. This would reset the grid. This little icon resets the grid preferences. This has the ability to bring in the split start and end times and other options. But if you did, that's where this might come in handy to reset it. So we won't go through all of these because they're similar. You view it, you can do the audit report, you can edit, or you can edit from the grid. So here's an example of the driver split 6 to 8 a.m., excuse me, and then 2 to 4 p.m. with no break times set, but the hours in the day would be required, and that would be 4. Another one is a third shift example. So you have customizable shifts. And the other setup for the timesheet manager or admin to set up when you're starting to use timesheets is the timesheet holidays. These can be used for dates when the employees should not enter regular time, like for example, a non-work day on the job calendar. If you don't restrict it with a timesheet holiday, the day on the timesheet's going to reflect it as a regular day. So in the case of the bus driver, it would just show 8 to 12. When it's really a day off for the bus driver, so the bus driver would have to either delete that line on the timesheet or they could create a timesheet holiday. So you would name your timesheet holiday, bus driver, union day. This option, if you check it, it will send you, well, that really should say, send an email to timesheet managers. That tooltip is kind of off, but by checking this and somebody entering a timesheet line item for that timesheet holiday, the managers would be notified, such as the timesheet manager, the district manager, or the admin user. You have the ability to enable this timesheet holiday or not. And you have the ability to choose it if it's for the entire day or not. So if you unselect the entire day, then you have the start date and the times that you can choose. Or you say for the whole day. You also have the ability to select your timesheet activity types. And these are regular time, exception time, or overtime. Or you can leave them empty for all pay types. So we're just going to leave it empty. You can also limit the holiday by timesheet activities. So for instance, you can or don't have to choose the employee by position. You can choose them by the pay group or the departments. If specific users are not selected, like there are no specific employees here, that's when you are able to select by pay group or departments. So as soon as you select an employee, okay, maybe that changed. I might have that wrong in my notes. So when a user creates their timesheet, any holiday that falls within that timesheet period is going to be automatically marked with a holiday, which in this case, it would be HO, and that would be listed with 0 hours on the timesheet. So I was going to add an employee. Oops, I'm not under the employee. To remove one, you would click it and remove from the grid, and then create with an end date. When it spans multiple days, you'll get this warning notifying you and asking if you really do want to create that timesheet holiday for that span. And obviously I did not, so that's why the warning is there. When it's just one day, it will not give you that warning. Okay, so as the timesheet manager, under the timesheet menu, because again, we'll close these. We have the timesheet menu, we have the timesheet approval menu, and we have the timesheet manager menu. And we've talked about the automatic period generator, period shifts, and holidays. So now we can go back to the ones that we skipped earlier, or we'll skip these other ones under the timesheet manager now so that we can talk about like the timesheet entry, the approval process, and then we'll come back to like the escalated approval. So in the appendix on that guideline, timesheet guideline, we talked about these. an initial setup, and then we're going to go to the timesheet entry, approval, and export, and then come back to like the escalated approval and after we talk about that. Oops. Okay, so as a user, since we created those periods, which created the timesheets, as this user, she'll have her timesheets sitting under her menu option, which again is my timesheets, and that's the only one because she's just a user. So you see how it automatically created them. This was the original one, and the automatic period generator created 2 future periods. So looking at her timesheet, you see that the period is specified, the position. The user does have the ability to go in there and edit the times on each line. Put a reason. If they need to remove a line, they would select the row. And down here at the minus sign, they would remove it. They need to add a line because they didn't mean to delete that. They would click the plus. They can use the calendar and populate the times. Is that called the activity? You have your options, regular, exceptions, and overtimes where the employee can choose. And so since it was a regular day that I accidentally deleted in my demo and showed you how to add one back, that'll populate. The times will automatically populate the calculated hours. The user has the ability to enter a break time if that is not configured in their shift and showing on the timesheet. And then they can save. I'm going to show you one more thing. Weekends are not generally on the timesheet, will not default on the timesheet, but say this person, since it, I think oh, okay. The last day is the 28th, which is a Friday. But say this one had worked on Saturday, they would just choose that by adding that line. They can add a reason. I thought you could leave it blank and come back to it. Can't read the validation. Because this is in the way. So I added that exception for that Saturday, and it's reflected here. Now, just because I saved the timesheet does not mean that I've submitted it to my supervisor for approval. You would have to hit this button to submit it. And then that's when it would go through that group, or it would go through the group chains set up by the groups for approval. If there was a day off for one of these employees, like a leave request, that would be reflected here on their timesheet as the leave request. However, you can't edit that line. You can't edit a leave request through the timesheet program because that comes through the leave request program. So if I click submit for approval, and I didn't mean to do that, I have the ability to recall a timesheet. As long as it hasn't been approved and the period for that timesheet is still open, I can hit the recall and it'll be back to the initiated stage, ready for you to edit and then resubmit for approval. Again, you can run an audit report. You can also do the same thing from the menu. We were in the view icon earlier, but you can edit the same way. You could submit for approval here. Excuse me. You can delete a timesheet. And you also have the ability to print the approval trial report. So for instance, if I generated that, you can see that it was submitted on this date and it was rejected and the reason on this date and who actually did those processes. So the user, oops, can do that from their My Timesheet grid. It can see their statuses and they can, when viewing, they can also see that same report that we just printed. They can see this on the timesheet approval trail. So that report is just printing this out, which can be done. It's not essentially the same, but I'll show you what this looks like. This is what your audit report normally looks like and what changed the old field to the new field. So different options that the user has looking at their timesheet. There are two ways that the user can submit their timesheet. Like I said, you can do it here from the grid, or you can do it when viewing it and clicking this button. And the status is the initiated here means that there's a created timesheet out there. That's all that means. The submitted, let's submit one. When it says submitted, it means just that I just submitted it for approval. When it says rejected in the workflow, it means it was rejected and then exported. That means it's been exported to USPS. So that is the user submitting their timesheet. And the approval process the supervisor has the approval role. They can go to their timesheet menu under the supervisor menu just to view the staff's timesheets regardless of their approval status. But to approve, they need that role to approve, and they do. They're a timesheet approver. So they can approve under the menu or at home. So let's look at the home screen first. Sorry for that popping up. There we go. So she was the one that she is the leave request approver and the timesheet approver. So when you're looking at the home screen, because she has both roles, she's going to see both grids on her pending workflow tasks. If she only was the timesheet approver, she would only have one. So you would just click, she has no leave requests, but she does have one timesheet that was submitted. So she could approve it here. She can view it, edit it, reject it, or approve it by viewing it. But besides the home page, she has that menu, timesheet approval, that she can also do the same thing with the buttons. So just different options of where the timesheet approver can go to approve their staff's timesheets. Let's see. So I'm going to go back to the admin user. The district timesheet menu option, that can be accessed by the timesheet manager, the district manager, and the admin user to view anybody's timesheets in the district and any statuses. There is a approval trail report that they can print. So for instance, we'll do that same rejected one. Sorry, it's asking me to sign into my account. But it's just like that other report where it gives you the action, the notes, and the timesheets. And that was right from the grid as the admin or district manager or timesheet manager. But they also have another menu option, which is the timesheet overview report for those same roles, the timesheet manager, admin, or district manager. This can generate an overview report of in a CSV file containing summarized timesheet information. And unless you're filtering out, it'll include all of them. So for instance, let's choose the 315 to 328. And I'm just going to generate it without choosing the employee, but I could choose the employee. I just don't know who's going to be on the report. And this is what it would look like. Oops. Again, it would give you the date that it was exported, approved, the timesheet end date, total hours. And that is called the timesheet overview report that those roles can generate from the timesheet menu. Only those roles have those two menu options. Okay, so I think we're ready to go back because we've entered a timesheet. I showed you how to approve a timesheet. So there's none left. And so now we'll go back to the timesheet manager and talk about the other options that we're going to come back to, which includes the escalated approval and the exporting items. So the escalated approval, oh, good, I have one out there. From this grid, you should be able to see all the submitted timesheets waiting for approval. It doesn't matter if you're the supervisor or not. As the role of the timesheet manager or admin user, you can see everyone's and have the ability to approve it, to get it going and to finalize the approval and escalate it. So you can, when you're viewing, you can approve or reject. You can do that from the menu as well. When you go to approve, it'll pop up with a note and a confirmation. Same with reject. You can put the reason why you're rejecting it if you so choose. The originator of the timesheet, say it was my timesheet and my boss is rejecting it, I would get notified that the timesheet has been rejected with any of these notes that were provided by my boss. And then as the user, I can go to my timesheets, edit my timesheet, and resubmit my timesheet. And then it could be approved then. If I had more than, say, like I had 10 timesheets listed here, I can select all, or I can select individually and approve in bulk if I wanted to, or reject in bulk if I wanted to. So that's a nice feature if somebody's out on vacation. And then the next piece is the timesheet export, and that's on the timesheet manager menu. It provides options to export a CSV file or send the information directly to USPS. Again, ESS requires the compensation records in USPS to have the start and stop days to correctly identify the compensation paid and extracted from this process. If any of those dates are missing, it'll say no valid compensations found for this position. That's the error message. So to get around that, your compensation date for non-contract compensations is acceptable to use like the year 2000, or no, yeah, 2099, 2099 is acceptable. If employees are paid daily compensation, timesheets can still be entered in hours. And during this export process, the hours are automatically converted with the corresponding percentage. And that's in the documentation for the actual formula. But it's like hours worked divided by hours in a day, or set to 1 if it's greater than a day. So here you can filter by the specific pay period. I thought I had timesheets there. I don't, because we didn't escalate approve. So let's timesheet, use the escalated approval and approve that. And then under the export menu, I can select that pay period and it will show. I can also filter by employees to include those approved timesheets to be included in the export, or I can specify pay groups and or building codes. So I only have one, so we'll just pretend there's a lot. In that pay period, if I select, I have these options to print what's in this file. I can do so by check marking the one I want and clicking the button. It doesn't give you much, but it gives you the pay period and the pay start and employee, the number of timesheet items in the pay group. But it also enables this button. So when you click on this, that's where your 2 options will come into play. You can do it, you can select the export method of CSV file where the user manually imports this into the USPS utility screen, or you can go to direct to USPS and you can see how those options change. So let's start with the CSV file. Oh, I like these tooltips. So if you check this and process it, all included timesheets will be marked with exported status. So those line items that might be on the timesheet for holiday, HO, or leave request types, like for a sick day, those might be showing on the timesheet, but those don't get exported to USPS or imported to USPS because holidays don't get paid with 0 hours and leave requests are processed through the leave request process and export. So you need to select an export type, and you see it's required, as well as one activity options. The activity options are regular, exception, and overtime. And then what your choice of what to export. Your export type, the first one is payments with attendance. Based on these selections, so I want all these selected and make payments with attendance. So when I process this and create the CSV file, the column U is going to be marked for yes, and that will enable the attendance posting when imported into USPS. The CSV column Y will have the compensation label, and the column Q is going to include what you included when you selected your activity options. If you select payments without attendance, again, based on what you choose here, I'm just going to say we're going to do all of these. Payments without attendance will post no attendance and just payments. So on your CSV file, column U for attendance posting will be empty because it will use the job calendars to count for these days. Column Y will still have the compensation label, and column Q on the CSV file will include your activity options that you choose. And then attendance without payments is that it's only going to post attendance and no payments. So when you generate that, the CSV file will have the column U for attendance marked with yes to post that to USPS for the attendance days. And column Y will not include a compensation label because we're not processing payments. Does that make sense? And again, if you have holiday and leave request entries and you want to show those exported, then you would click on this to get that to reflect the exported status. Once you create this file, that's where you would go into USPS and import those. And that's laid out that's laid out in the documentation in both in the export chapter of ESS as well as in USPS. But that's where you would go under utilities, attendance, and process that CSV file for it to be in the attendance record under core. And possible errors that you could get would be if the job was terminated in USPS, you would get a note saying that the attendance entry could not be posted to a position which the job status is terminated. The other option would be to directly post to USPS. And these options are changed when you click on that. This still means the same for those items on the timesheet that would not get exported normally, like a holiday or a leave request. You can mark those as exported by choice. You do get a file when you process this, and it's called the timesheet export errors.csv file. And it will indicate the number of records successfully posted, along with any errors when you process this. These selections do correspond with the manual selections in USPS, but they may be still out of the same order as what is shown on the USPS screen. So we just say be careful when you're selecting these, or advise the districts to be careful when selecting these. There is a link in the ESS documentation taking you to that point where it also describes each of these selections as well. So the combined attendance entries, if this is checked, the attendance entries that include the payment information will be combined when imported. So it'll result in a payroll payment future or a payroll payment current entry for that employee, provided that the columns in the provided that everything is set up correctly. If you uncheck that, that was if it was checked. If you uncheck it, the attendance entries that include payments will not be combined when imported, and then separate payment future and current entries will be created for the employee. If this is check marked, any absence entries when imported will create the attendance records for sick. Well, I'm not sure why that is there, because leave entries is not imported with timesheets, I didn't think. But again, these options are stated in the USPS and ESS for more in depth of what these correlate to the USPS application. You can choose your location code options, which is used to determine the position to post the transaction to if one is not included in the load file. So it can be the position's building IRN, or it can be the position's building code or department code. If you're using a location code, you can choose none or choose those. The post payroll options are post to processing future or post to payroll processing current. And then the payroll account to charge. The defined payroll account for position charges the position pay account. And the sub for SSN charges the regular employee's position's pay account, but the employee ID must be entered to have a compensation with the remaining pays. And there's more information in the documentation about that. But these mimic the options that payroll in USPS are used to selecting. When you, excuse me, when you go to process this and export to USPS, it'll be automatic. It'll say you're successful. And then, like I said, it'll create this file that will give you that no errors reported, or it will list any errors if there are errors. And it said 11 records successful. Let me show you that link I was talking about in regarding those options. So in your USPS attendance and absent chapter, these will explain how these are used more in depth. It's been a while since I've been in the USPS side. And then there's a link in the ESS documentation guideline process that we've been going over that takes you to this as well under the export chapter. Okay, so the only other menu option that we haven't hit is this export timesheet history menu option. And this, each line, well, that only has one timesheet, sorry. Let's see if there's, it'll include all the timesheets that were exported together. So if you decide that this timesheet or the list of them needs to be reverted, you can select that line, click on this, and it'll revert the timesheet, which means it'll remove the exported status from the selected records. So the status returns to approved instead of exported, because this is the exported timesheet history. So if something's been exported and you want to revert it, this is where you would go as the timesheet manager or admin. Select it and revert it. It will then, once approved, be included in the timesheet export grid to be export again, that icon export again. So you can, if anything's been edited, come in here, select it, and export it again. And it will include the updated exported information. Any questions? I apologize. I have not been following the chat at all. But I'm sure my coworkers have taken care of that. This, at the end of the PowerPoint, I did have another link to the quick guide in our appendix, like timesheet entry, supervisor approval, and the timesheet manager, which these are what we had just gone through, including this. On the next page, oops, or the last page of the PowerPoint, I just listed like the documentation, the roles, crosswalk, the menu options that I referred to earlier, the appendix, and then other YouTube playlists. Any questions at all? Okay, before I end, I hope you guys all have a great weekend, but Michelle wants to speak, so I will turn that over to her. Have a good weekend.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just wanted just to talk about a couple of things. Just a quick look ahead to future training sessions that we're going to have. For one, next week, let me scroll back up here. Next week, we did have a School Comms Fridays with Fiscal session that was scheduled, and that has been canceled. At this time, School Comms has been permanently suspended. My understanding is that the product was re-evaluated by our new leadership and by the ITC directors, and the decision was made to not move forward with it at this time. So obviously they're going to suspend the project. We are canceling the session for next week. So if you've signed up for that, you'll probably get some type of email stating that the session has been canceled. So any questions on that particular session? So that means basically our next session is going to be in September when we do our August release recap. Also, we do have OEDSA coming up. I'm going to show you the OEDSA calendar or the agenda here. So I do hope that many of you are planning to attend OEDSA next month. So the conference is going to be, I think, the 16th through the 18th this year. And just kind of looking down at the agenda, State Software is doing quite a few sessions this year. If you look in Polaris D, we're going to be in a new location for Thursday. And then Friday, we'll go back to our Gemini rooms that we've been holding them with prior conferences. But Thursday, we're going to be doing a USAS Grids session, Suburb Ohio overview session, USAS account change in the beginning of the afternoon after lunch, and at the end, just an ITC only session, just going over support desk best practices. So that's going to be Thursday. And then, like I said, Friday, we're moving back over to the Gemini room, and we'll be covering some ippy-dippy features, a session on employee onboarding in USPS, and a session on understanding overtime. So lots of good information. So, a great thing to pass on to your districts as well, to let them know registration is open right now. I think this is the only time during the year where the entire state software support team and our project managers and our director are there. So a great time to learn more about the different applications and some of the features that are in there. The last thing I wanted to talk about is Document Store. We know that some of the ITCs may have put it on hold, put their migrations on hold, and because of fiscal year end, trying to take care of one thing at a time. And now many of you are starting back up and finishing out your migrations to Document Store. And based on feedback that we received from the ITCs, as well as our own experience when we were working through the migrations on the tickets that you had sent, we put together some more guidance, additional guidance. And what we did is we created this Document Store migration best practices page to kind of help out with the process. So if you just do a search in our wiki for Document Store migration, it'll come right up. And basically, this just kind of goes through any pre-migration things that you need to check. Then it also covers, the actual installing Document Store, which, was covered, when we went through Document Store back in February. And then scheduling your migrations best practices, just based off of, what we've the feedback we received back from you guys. We put some information in here, and then just post migration follow-up checks. And so that's what's listed in here. So just another, tool to just kind of resource to kind of look through to make sure that, migrations are going well, and that everything is getting migrated over correctly. I mean, obviously, I know that some of you, we have tickets right now where they're still getting errors, or, certain reports aren't migrating correctly, and you're getting an error in the application or the migration log that you're just like, I don't know what this means exactly. And you've looked through, the troubleshooting documents, and you've looked through this document. Obviously, create a support ticket for those. We're kind of handling those on an as needed basis, because it does depend on, how much memory you have, or what exactly is the error. Is it a new error that we need to track? So if you're unsure, please, create a ticket, and we'll kind of look at that, and also look at any resource information, such as, go back up here, like some of these resource values. We may have to increase some of this, and it just depends. It depends on the data that's being migrated over. So, like I said, create support tickets, and we'll get those handled, and get your migrations completed so that you guys can move on. I think those were the only three things I kind of wanted to wrap up with. Do you guys have any questions?
Can I ask a totally unrelated question while we're all just here?
Oh, absolutely, Andrew.
Are we gonna do A2A or portal for Iris for 1099s? I'm getting ready to send out instructions on that.
A2A.
Okay.
Yes.
That was easy. Thank you.
We did put something out there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, on our newsletter back in May, where I think we had some of those specifications on a DYK article, and we're planning on putting out a reminder message in the newsletter to this month about it. Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend. And I guess we'll see you guys in September. Take care.